Chatters, chatties, welcome home for a Great American Chat, a podcast where we chat about great American media. I'm Chad Maurice, and today we are chatting about the 5th episode of Destination Heaven, the Great American Pure Flix series. But before we get into that, of course, we got to chat a little bit about some news. Candace Cameron Bure's mystery movie, The Ansley Gregor Mysteries, is going to premiere later this month, July 25th on Great American Pure Flix, and it will premiere in October on Great American Family. So that's pretty exciting, and I think we're going to get some other mystery movies as well, I believe. And right now going on is Great American Christmas in July is underway on both Great American Family and Great American Pure Flix. And Pure Flix has some pretty good selection there. They've got quite a few of the Great American Family movies that aired over the last 3 years. They have a good selection, and they also have a lot of movies that never aired on the channel, but are also good as well. So they have quite a variety of Christmas movies on there. So check it out when you get a chance. Let's get into the 5th episode of Destination Heaven. This one's titled Into the Woods. And no, it is not a musical. There is no singing involved. It's directed by Vance Null, written by Dean Batali. It guest stars John Michael Finley, who plays Nathan. He's our main character in this one. And James Eddy. He's a guy that Nathan meets while camping. The synopsis says, a young man at a crossroads takes to the woods to be alone and seek God for direction, but is shocked to learn what God has in store. So let's see here. So Nathan is walking in the woods, and he's on the phone with a woman named Lynette. They are arguing. He says he needs to be alone with God. He says, we'll talk about all this when I return. Then he loses the signal on his phone. His phone loses the service. Now, at this point, we don't know who Lynette is. We don't know what their relationship is. We don't know if that's his girlfriend, his wife, in this scene. But then later on, when he's camping, they show a close-up of his hand, and you can see he has a wedding band on his left hand. So then we know that Lynette is his wife. He tries building a tent, but doesn't have much luck. God shows up. He says, I hear you wanted to talk. Nathan says, yeah, but I didn't think you would actually show up, meaning he's never seen God. He's only talked to him. God says, yeah, sometimes I like to get personal. Nathan goes fishing. And he goes fishing because all he brought for dinner was candy bars and potato chips. So he wants some fish to go with his junk food. God says, you used to come here a lot, didn't you? Nathan says, yeah, when I was young with my dad. God asks, did you enjoy it? He says, I enjoyed getting out of the house. I think my dad enjoyed it, but I think he would have enjoyed it more if I wasn't around. He gets a fish on his line, but it gets away. So he gets frustrated and gives up. He's lying in his tent in a rainstorm, reading the Bible. Water starts dripping on his forehead. God shows up and they begin talking about his lousy childhood. Next day, he meets a father and son who is camping nearby. The guy wants to know how Nathan has dry firewood when it rained all night. Nathan says, I don't know. I didn't even know that firewood was there. The guy asks if he can have some, and he tells his son to grab as many logs as he can. He offers to make Nathan lunch in exchange for the firewood. Nathan goes over to help the kid with the firewood, and he's piling it into his arms there. The dad tries to stop him and says, hey, he's got it. Don't worry about him. Nathan thinks about it, and he decides to join them for lunch. The guy says, Just don't let my son cook your hot dog. He will burn it like he does his marshmallows. Man, this dad is rough here. He's a jerk to his son, that's for sure. And it makes Nathan think about his relationship that he had with his father. So Nathan shows up for lunch at their campsite. Guy says, lunch is going to be late. My son wandered off. Nathan says, well, shouldn't we go look for him? And the dad isn't concerned at all. He says, he'll turn up eventually. Nathan says, well, why don't we go look for him? The guy says, I didn't come out here to be part of a search party. Then he puts a piece of gum in his mouth and throws the wrapper on the ground. Nathan says, I'll go look for him. You can stay here. The guy says, yeah, you can do whatever you want. It's a free country. So Nathan finds the kid sitting on a rock by the creek. The kid asks, what kind of fish do you think live in this creek? Nathan says, I don't know. I've fished here many times, but I never caught anything. The kid says, my dad and I were supposed to go fishing, but we forgot the fishing poles. My dad says I'm the one who forgot the poles. Nathan sits down with him, and they talk about fish and whether fish are happy or not. Nathan convinces him to get up and come eat lunch. I like this scene. This is a really good scene. I liked all the scenes that these two had together. Yeah, this one was really good. So they get back to the campsite, and we see his dad littering again on the ground with chewing gum wrappers. He scolds his son for wandering off. Then he tells him to go get another chair out of the truck for Nathan. He asks Nathan if he has any kids. He says no. The guy says, well, think about it long and hard before you do. You're either yelling at them for what they didn't do or yelling at them for what they did do. Then he points out a marshmallow bag lying on the ground and says, look at this. He ate all the marshmallows last night and he left the empty bag on the ground after all I've told him several times about littering. This is what he does, which is funny because we just saw this guy littering twice with chewing gum wrappers. The guy says, I don't know how to get him to do what I say. Then he gets more irritated and says, what's taking him so long to find that chair? So then he starts yelling at his son. This guy's brutal. So Nathan goes out and tries to fish again. The father and son show up. Nathan and the boy have another nice scene together. They're joking around. Nathan asks the guy if his son can stay and fish a little while. The guy says, nope, we've got to go. Then he throws a chewing gum wrapper on the ground again. So they leave. Nathan catches a fish right when God shows up. We get a funny line when God says, hey, you got a big one. It's not Jonah could live inside of it for 3 days big, but it's not bad. Nathan says, this has been a really good time, meeting that kid, getting to know him, thinking about the things I'm going through. God says, I'm glad they were camping at a campsite right near yours. Nathan says, hey, wait a minute. You're the one who put them here, didn't you? God says, I know you wanted to be here alone, just you and I, but I thought you should interact with someone else. Nathan says, yeah, but why a jerk like that father? He was awful to his kid. Never had one nice thing to say to him or about him. He treated him like my dad used to treat me. He never taught me to fish, got mad at me if the firewood got wet, criticized how I made s'mores by burning the marshmallows. And that guy even littered with his chewing gum wrappers, just like my dad used to. He says my dad used to throw the wrappers on the ground just like that. Then Nathan walks over and picks up one of the wrappers and looks at it and says, wait a minute, this is the same kind of chewing gum my dad used to chew. They stopped making this years ago. Then he realizes that that guy was his dad, his father. He says to God, that kid was me, wasn't it? Nathan says, you kept me from recognizing them. God says, just like the men on the road to Emmaus, or like in a dream when you don't know, or like in a dream when you don't know what it's about until just before you wake up. Nathan says, just before you wake up, and then we see him waking up from a dream. And then we realize that all these interactions he was having with this guy and his son was all just a dream. Nathan walks out of his tent, and God is sitting there. He says to God, so what was that all about? God says, sometimes the only way I can get people's attention is in a dream. He says, your tent made it through the storm. Nathan says, barely. God asks, what are you afraid of? He says, I'm afraid of I'm going to end up like my dad. I don't want to treat my kid like my dad treated me. God says, you don't have to. You can be different. You aren't stuck in a pattern of becoming your father. Things aren't written in stone. He says, I've written things in stone before. Sometimes they get smashed and rewritten. That's how you can think about the person you are free to become. You don't have to be afraid of becoming like your father. Nathan says, I guess I could start thinking that way. God says, you can always turn to me for help. Nathan says, I always thought I had to be the perfect dad. I didn't know how to do that. God says there is only one perfect father, and some people aren't even satisfied with that one. That's a good line. I like that one. God tells him, I believe you are going to be a good father. So Nathan packs up and is leaving his campsite. He gets a signal on his phone, again, that he has service. So he calls Lynette. He apologizes to her. He says, I'm sorry I had to come out here by myself, but I had to be alone for a while. He tells her God showed up for him. She says, I hoped he would, and that you would realize that you're not stuck in becoming the way your dad was. Then we see Lynette on the phone as the camera pans out, and we see that she is pregnant and standing in front of a doctor's office. Nathan says, you tell that kid of ours I can't wait to meet him. They tell each other that they love each other, and the credits roll. Oops. There we go. That's better. Oh, I love this episode. This was a good one. I think it might be my favorite so far. I really enjoyed the relationship between Nathan and the kid that he meets while he is camping, which is really himself, which was really a cool idea. I thought it was really cool that God showed himself and his father. He was able to, or I'm saying Nathan was able to watch his interactions with his father as an adult. I thought that was really neat. Although I wish that the scenes of him meeting his father and himself, I wish that wouldn't have been a dream. I wish that would have really happened. But I guess the writers, they wanted it to be like in the Bible when God talks to people in their dreams. I guess that's what they were going for. Thought the acting was good. The guy who played the jerky father, he was a good jerk. And the kid was good. Like I said before, I really enjoyed the scenes that he had with Nathan there. So this episode is all about people who are afraid of becoming their parents. The moral of the episode is that even if you had a bad parent growing up, that doesn't mean that you will be bad at it. And the pattern can be broken with God's help. So yeah, nice message, good episode. Enjoyed it all around. And why isn't my slide changing? Hey, my slide didn't change. Hey, what's going on here? Wait a minute. Oh, there we go. There we go. All right, so we got one more episode left. The 6th episode, which we will chat about next week. And that episode is about divorce and the effect that it has on kids. So check back in with me next week for that. And as always, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and the podcast apps, and you can follow along on social media on Instascam and YouTube and Facebook. I'm at Great American Chat, and at X at GA Chat Podcast. So that's it for now. Until next week, you keep the faith, keep smiling, keep your friends close, and keep your great American family